something just came. Okay. So for me, like I said, this really kind of gives me a fly that I can try to move fish in the middle column with. And it's interesting because this was a fly that was originally designed for saltwater, and it originally never really developed a big following in the United States and in freshwater fisheries in the United States. And I guess the way the story goes, at least the way they tell it in the Landwehr smallmouth book, is those guys, were looking for a fly to move fish in the middle column and just under the surface. And they wanted something that got them somewhat close to the action of a rapala, like a stick bait. And they started to fish this fly, and they had them in their shop for people that were going out east to striper fish. And they soon learned that after they'd started using this fly and really catching a lot of fish with it, they soon learned that Umpqua, this was 20 years ago, Umpqua was going to discontinue the fly. So they were immediately like, well, give us everything, whatever stock you've got left, send it out our way. And those guys and a number of other, really kind of high profile Midwest bass fishery guides and shops really kind of put the Murdich back on the map. So in a way, the Murdich almost kind of came and went as a freshwater bass fly. And now you can go online and you can find a lot of your bigger tires are actually doing demos of this fly. So you're going to get the version that I tie, and my version is pretty close to Bill Murdich's original, not exact. I'm not a follower of everything has to be right down to what the recipe calls for. You kind of make adjustments as you go along and figure things out. So, the disclaimer for me is always, if you have a material that gets you close enough to what I'm using tonight, or you think it will work, use it, right? Don't be like, oh, I got to run out and buy this material and, hunt this stuff down just to be able to finish this fly off. As I go along, I'll try to suggest some alternatives to what I'm going to use. So what I have in the vise is a 2-aught hook. It's a Daiichi, and I'm forgetting the actual series it is. It's a 2460 something, and it's a 2-aught saltwater hook. So chances are most people here tonight have something that gets them close to that or the exact hook. So, I've seen these tied down to 4. A lot of them are 2s, 1s, 1-aughts, and 2-aughts, so they tend to be on a bigger hook. And I already tied the bucktail in. That was in part so I could kind of, blather for a couple minutes to y'all and not have to be here, worrying about the bucktail. So what I'm going to use for thread is I'm using gel spun on this, and I'm using gel spun because it allows me to really cinch down the materials. The materials that are used in the Murdich Minnow are largely synthetic, so you use quite a bit of flash in the back end of the fly. And what I've found is that between one of my favorite cements, which is Z-Ment and GSP, I'm able to make sure that I don't tie those materials in, and as I'm tying, I'm not having an issue of them rolling. So they're staying on top of the hook where I want them. If you have good thread control and your thread really well, it's and it's in good shape and it's not all beat up from UV degradation, you should be just fine with 140 or 210 denier, no issues. But I got this gel spun that I'm going to use with it, and I've tied this bucktail in 2 hook lengths long behind the gape of the hook. So whenever I start to kind of measure out this fly, one thing I will note is on a 2-aught hook, I want this fly to be around 4.5 inches. If it's a little shorter than that, that's not a problem. If it's a little longer, again, not a problem. But if you tie a fly that ends up around 3.5 or 3 3/4 inches, your proportions are probably off a little. So please keep that in mind. If it's 5.5 inches, you probably went a little bit long or left things a little bit long on the back end. So with that said, I'm actually going to start tying some stuff in here. So the fly starts with bucktail as kind of a base layer on the back end. I think it helps to build body, number one, of course. And the other thing that I think it helps do, as I've thought about it more, is it helps to hold up the flash so that the flash isn't all wonton whenever it's in the water. I think it kind of actually helps to kind of, keep it together a little bit. So Whenever I start to, tie in my flash materials, the first thing that in most circumstances, people are using pearl flash glue. Most people on here would probably be able to raise their hand and say, yeah, I got pearl flash glue. I got more of it than I think I need, right? So you're going to take about 6 or 7 strands of pearl flash glue, and you're going to cut that off. And just tie that in. Try to make sure you get all the same length strands. This is like from a hank that I was being all lazy about, cutting strands all different lengths, and I'm kind of paying for it now. So when I tie this pearl flash glue in, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I tie at least 1 hook length past the bucktail. That does not mean that I need to leave the flash that long, but if I have the flash there to cut, then I'm in a better position than if I tie it in too short and I don't have it there to cut. So I almost always try to tie my flash material in a little bit longer than I think I might need. So, just set it on the top, over. Michael's base here is a little bit wobbly, so I'm going to have to kind of hold the hook down. And then you can wrap up, cinch it down. It's not very pretty tying, but what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to bring this right back over and then tie, right back over that. Right. Back. Sorry if this is kind of coming in and out of focus, folks. I'll do my best to keep it straightened. So the next thing that you're going to tie in is your top color flash. So your back flash. And this is where you can kind of let your imagination run wild. How many different variations of Flashaboo are out there? How many different ways can you blend Flashaboo and create something that, is something different? Here, I'm just going to use chartreuse holographic Flashaboo, the old Lefty Cray thing. If it ain't chartreuse, it ain't no use. This is when it comes to colors in this fly, my 2 favorites are the standbys, the gold and the silver. But I did start to fish the chartreuse last summer, and it worked really well. A note on the chartreuse, again, I think the instructions are just as important. It's kind of hard for me to tell you exactly how much this is, but I would guess that's about 18 to 20 strands. Whenever I see this fly tied by other tiers, the thing that I don't like in other ties is they're not using enough flash. This is a fly that I think that part of the magic of it really comes from having a really flashy tail. So I try to tie in if I'm gonna do one thing wrong with the tail of this fly, I want to tie in a little too much flash. I don't want to under flash the fly. So that's something that I want to make sure everyone has there while I'm tying this part of the fly. If you're gonna do anything, over flash it, and try to make sure that you tie your tail a little too long, because you can always cut it if you don't like the length. About a hook length further. Now, the other thing about this is we're not going to tie this back. We're not going to tie this this flash that's forward here back. We're going to leave it up there. And this gel spun, I don't have a whole lot of experience tying on it. What I learned is that there's no stretch in it. So, if your vise isn't welded to your desk, you can bend a hook, you can pull it out of your vise. I mean, you can, if you don't have a lot of experience tying on it, you can really, make a mess. So then I'm going to come back after I get that tied in like that. And I want to leave that up there like that, because that's going to come into play after I tie in the midsection. So got one guy that's a little too long there. Okay, just a little longer than the bucktail. I just don't like the proportions whenever the flash comes right to the end of the bucktail. I don't, if you look at some of the original ties that Bill has and the Tight Lines crew with their video out there, they put their flash in a little longer than the bucktail. So this to me is like, if there's a secret sauce in this fly, it's this right here, and there's probably a half dozen substitutions for it. This is a hairline ice fur. I think Tim Flagler tied up the Murdich recently with Tom Rosenbauer, and I think he used EP fiber. My understanding is EP fiber is not cheap, so you might want to, you might want to go with the less expensive option. You might even know of a craft store that has something similar to this synthetic material, and you're like, that's $2. I can get a, I don't know, half a pound of it, and have enough for a lifetime. This stuff isn't bad. It's like, I don't know, $3.25 from some of your big box stores, and you could tie probably 12.5 flies, Murdich minnows with this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a length of about 1 inch, and whatever that width is, that's about a thumb width, right? So whenever I hold it up, I want it to be about a thumb width. It's a hairline ice fur. I got the pack right here just to show folks. It's white ice fur. I've never seen the fly tied with any other type of ice fur, and you're going to see that in a minute. We're gonna really enjoy bastardizing this fly pretty nicely. So with a marker. So I want to cheek about an inch or so long. This is the midsection of the fly. And the reason why I say that this is kind of where the magic lives is when you tie this in, this is what gives the fly its kick. So this is what's going to give it that erratic motion that you're looking for whenever you're fishing it, whenever you're stripping it, jerking it in the water. Okay. So what I'll do here is just cut this. What, am I being funny? Oh, goodness. Grown men acting as if. Okay. So I tie this in. I try to leave about a 1/4 inch or so ahead of my tie-in point so I can really get it tied down good. That's a little too far back. And if there's one part that I try to make sure I really get right, it's this one. So what I really want is I want this midsection to be about a 1/4 inch past the deepest part of the bend. Okay, a couple of wraps, and that's fairly well secure. Use GSP to really cinch it down. And then we can get our other piece. I mean, if they're not completely even, I don't think that's the end of the world. If anything, it might make the kick a little bit more erratic. So don't rack your brain trying to get that 100% in line. A little bit of roll around the hook is okay. If that kind of envelops the hook, that's a good thing. You don't want to see the material roll a ton. You kind of want to just see it move what little bit isn't tight yet, move around the hook. And then I tie up a bit, cinch down, and then I want to come in here and again, I'm going to try to clean this up fairly well. If it's not perfect, it's not the end of the world. That gets tied down. Sorry, I don't know the ways of the Regal very well, so it's like swinging someone else's back. And I'm a lefty, so I got that going for me. Sorry, I'm going a little slow here, folks. I do not want to cut that flash. All right, that's pretty good. You get a little bit of a bump there. I heard one dude in a video call it the Murdich bump. It's like, it's kind of hard to completely eliminate, but we'll just kind of clean that up a little bit more right there. And then this is where we want to bring all this up and over to the best of our ability. Okay. And another thing I'll note is where I tied those cheeks in, finish those cheeks there, tying them in there, I would probably Z-ment there. So I'll Z-ment after I tie in the bucktail. I'll Z-ment after I tie in those, tie in the ice fur. And then that is going to help keep, that also is going to aid in keeping this fly from doing any sort of rolling. So I come back in here and I cut just past those cheeks. Whoops. Should have tied them down first. Cart in front of the horse here. There we go. That's what was supposed to happen. Y'all didn't see that. No, you didn't. You didn't see it. Sorry, we're going to edit that out. That'll come out in post. Sorry, I got to keep my hand on this hook because I'm really worried about this vice base moving on me. That assures that the back of this fly is consistent and you don't have a gap where you don't have any, you know, green color and flash. Okay. So sometimes what I'll do if I'm just trying to create like a taper down to where the head of the fly is going to get tied in is I'll actually throw on some like 140 or 210 so I don't have to use up all of my gel spun. It's not like terribly expensive. It ain't going to break the bank, but it's in high demand right now too. In some places you can't find a lot of it. So, you know, I don't want to run out at the wrong time. This might be a good place too if you're someone that does not mind super gluing, you know, on your flies. That would be a good time to do that right there. So, so the next thing is actually the last part of the fly. What's really fascinating about this fly that I kind of love is the hook is essentially reserved for the head. That's really where that's smallmouth bass. Whenever they hit a fly, they're really aiming for the head, and this gives them a lot to target here. So this is the 30 millimeter pearl Estaz. I think Spirit River has it, and just about anybody makes like a large size corded Estaz material. I've seen people use like the small and the medium Palmer chenilles. I think they're kind of popular. I don't know what kind of action you get out of them. So for me, I just stick with what was part of the original recipe. Just tie that in. Tie up. I'm not used to. And here we're gonna palmer it up. I don't know, I fan it back a little bit to try to keep the material going one direction as much as possible. I think it makes the head just a little bit neater. Yeah, this is rather uncomfortable. comfort adjustments before you go. I usually do a couple behind and, or sorry, a couple behind and one in front, and that locks it down pretty good. Sorry about that, folks. There we go. Sorry. No,
You need a clamp.
yeah. We'll just get this clamped off and then we'll finish it and talk about it for a minute. So that's pretty much the finished fly, okay, for the most part anyway. Now the fun part. One of the cool things about the Murdich is you get to bastardize the hell out of it with a marker. And this just upsets a lot of purists that you're about to put ink on a fly. And I think one of the cool things about it is that there's again, almost limited by imagination how many different ways you can mark up your flies. I keep it pretty simple. I will, and these are Copic markers. I don't use Sharpie, Prismacolor. There's a few different markers out there that are alcohol. Yeah, they're alcohol based, so they don't, you don't have to worry about them running and stuff like that. And they don't like gob up. What I like about this too is that it doesn't gob up the material. I feel like sometimes with Sharpie, it stiffens the material more. I don't get that with this. So, and it's cool because they got like a felt tip and a stiffer tip as well. So we're just going to use felt tip and color in around the head top. I kind of go about the point on both sides and then work my way around. It's okay to go back into the ice fur. The ice fur will hold some of that ink, which is cool. So you can kind of continue blending that in the back. If you're looking for darker colors, keep going. If you want it to be a little lighter, don't use as much ink. I would finish this head with like a Loon UV thin, and it absolutely should have eyes on it. I'm not going to tie eyes tonight because we've got a bunch of people here tying, and I didn't want to be farting around with eyes and whatnot. Just a couple of notes on eyes. I don't think they have to be huge. Maybe on a fly this size, maybe a 5 or 6 millimeter would be a good size. If you look at a lot of Murdiches, the eyes aren't excessively oversized on them. And also, don't tie them too far forward. I just watched a really good video by Brit talks a lot when they tie in eyes on their heads. A lot of people are tying in their eyes in here, and it affects the action. And I've made this mistake numerous times. It'll still fish, it'll still catch fish. But the better part is kind of more a little bit further back, and then you can shape the head a little bit more closer to the eye of the hook. It allows you to shape it a little better, not having so much of a round head or an awkwardly shaped head, but rather one that kind of has a more bullet shape to it. Whatever your favorite, you can just slap eyes on it and go fish. And then when they fall off, just put eyes on it again, or you can really like bulletproof the head with a UV cure of some sort. Golds, yellow, silvers, chartreuse. I'm going to try Fire Tiger and Fire Tiger tail with like an emerald head this year. I'm going to try orange holographic with copper mixed in and an orange head this year. And you get a lot of nice kick out of this fly. This is a fly that kind of does more kick like this, as opposed to flies that are kind of going up and down. So Murdich Minnow, pretty easy to tie. Most of y'all are going to have most, if not all, of the material you need to tie this fly at home. You can mix it up, blend your flashes, blend your chenilles, blend your markers, do what you want. Fairly simple. And yeah, fish it, enjoy it. Good?
Okay.
Cool.
Good job, Don.
Uh-oh.
Do you want to switch it back to the
What kind of marker? What kind of marker was that you used?
The one that I used is the, I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's a Copic sketch. Apparently these are kind of a big deal. When I went to Michael's to buy these, I knew they were there and I'm looking around for them and like, this is the marker they keep. This is the marker they keep behind the glass case. So you got to like have, you know, have the dude from Michael's come and, you know, open up the glass case for you. And he opens it up and there's about 200 colors there. So this one, what I'll do is I'm happy to put out in the chat the actual colors that I use, like the actual color codes, because I actually played with them for like 15 minutes trying to make sure that I wasn't getting a crappy color of chartreuse and getting the right chartreuse that I wanted, because they're not cheap. I'm not going to lie. I think these markers, and they were on sale and they were like $5.99. So they're, you know, it's not like a $2 or $3 marker. What's up?
Just wanted to direct you
Okay.
over to that one
Cool.
if we're gonna chat anymore.
Yeah, so let's see what else. For me, like I said, you know, this fly, it solves a problem for me. And, you know, I can't carry all the flies in the world that I might like to, and whenever I'm wading and fishing for bass. And another reason why a lot of people are fishing the middle column now is the visual eat, right? Like you might catch more fish in the bottom 18 inches of the water column with, you know, heavier lead eye flies and buggers and things of that sort. But wow, you know, like I hadn't been fishing the middle column very much. And then the last couple of years, I've really focused on it. And I don't know, I just think pound for pound, the smallmouth bass is one of the meanest fish swimming around in salt water or in fresh water. So I love watching them, you know, blow these up. It's a lot of fun. You can fish them on a floating line. What I do in that case, if I'm not going to switch to an intermediate line, is I might add a little bit more tippet, and that kind of allows the fly to get down there a little bit more. The other nice thing is once one fish will hit this fly and it gets a little bit of that fish goo on there, then you know, it will break that meniscus a little easier and get down into the water. Doesn't need to be down very far. I mean, fish will come up and hit this when they're attacking bait fish and when they're in that behavior. So let's see, red eyes, silver eyes, whatever you've got. Like don't overthink the whole, like it's got to be this eye or it's got to be that, or it has to be this marker or that marker. You know, gold, silver, chartreuse, and one other color. Have a 1/0 and a 2/0. You know, one that's a little smaller, one that's a little bigger. Maybe tie one that's a little longer, one that's a little shorter. I don't know. You know, I try to keep it right in that 4.5 inch range if I'm tying on a 2/0 hook. Yeah, hope you like it.
Good job, Don. Thank you.
All right, and with that, I'll say thank you, Don. Great fly. While we get set up for the next fly, talk a little bit. As many of you know, I will not pass up many opportunities to raise money for some of the activities that we take part in here in the chapter. This year, we are running about 21 trout in the classroom tanks throughout the Tompkins County, Cortland County, and Seneca County areas. It takes a good deal of money for us to contribute to keep that program running. We also are sending 3 kids, I think, this year to the DC camps. Honestly, they are not new attendees. They're attendees who haven't been able to go over the past 2 years. We have a lot of flies. We've got, I don't know, I would estimate got a box of nymphs. There's probably about 6 dozen varying patterns in here, from really, really tiny little pheasant tails to slightly larger caddises to rainbow warriors to varying kinds of hare's ears and pheasant tails. There are lots of streamers. I think I think Josh brought us about a dozen of the complex buggers that he's tying. I've got more in this box, including a couple double bunnies. There will be about a half a dozen of the Moto's minnows that I'm tying, a few of the shimmering minnows. It's another one of these kind of high to mid column bass streamers. The other side is just filled up with woolly buggers. Mostly, I think they're size 8s. There might be some size 6s in there. Probably a couple dozen buggers in there. Comes with this box. There are new. Did these come from you or from Josh? You?
Yeah.
Eric donated probably about 3 dozen varying streamers, including about a dozen of the Thunder Creek minnows that he will tie tonight. Don will also be adding several of the Murdich minnows that he tied this evening. So there will be a large assortment. If you are interested in placing a bid, you can put it in the chat and we will monitor it. And towards the end of the talk, or at the end of the talk, we will send it off to the high bidder. Hoping we can raise a good amount of money for the programs that I hold near and dear to my heart. I would say if you have any questions, please send them in, interrupt, whatever it's supposed to be a semi conversant meeting. We like sharing tips. And I think as you've noticed from Don starting, and if you know me, we're all able to talk a lot and we like to talk. None of us have fished in a month and a half at this point in time, and we really like to talk about fishing.
Yeah, I literally prepped my fly so that I could talk more.
So with that, I will start on the second pattern of the night. This pattern is the Moto's Minnow. This is a pattern that I really was trying to find a lot of background because I was interested in who created it and why. And I looked online a few times and I haven't been able to find anything about it. So my own personal story of how the Moto's Minnow came into my life is a couple of years ago, I was fishing the Cohocton with Don. And it was kind of a cool, cold, miserable January-ish day. And the fishing was pretty slow. We went out in the afternoon. We were out in the morning and we were fishing with not much luck, although Don did manage to catch a couple of fish on a fly that shall not be named. And we took a lunch break and we came back out and we were fishing with streamers. And Don found one that was working. Caught a couple of fish on it. I had found one that was working, but not as effectively as Don's was, and he told me about the fly. And he handed me one, and I fished it the rest of the afternoon, and we both had pretty successful days on the stream. This fly, if you know me and you know what I like to tie, is kind of the antithesis of the flies that I like, because I like flies that are really simple to tie. This is not that fly. This fly is a pain in all of its aspects of life. It's a complicated and long tying fly. It's a relatively smaller streamer. I usually tie it on size 6 and 8 hooks. You could probably tie it down to a 4 or up to a 10 or 12. Although when you watch me tie this, you will realize you don't want to tie it on a 4 because you'll be tying all day long just to get one fly going. There really aren't a lot of materials in this fly, which is also why it's kind of misleading in its complexity. I tie it on a simple streamer hook. The hook I've got in my vise right now is just a J Stockard. It's the model 245. It's an 8. It's a size 8. It's a 4X long shank. I've got a medium cone on there. This one is brass. You can use tungsten as well. This is a heavy fly. I use it for trout. I use it for trout a lot in the winter. Although I do use it year round for trout. You want this fly to be on the bottom. You're going to then also use a little bit of lead wire. I put the cone on already, so you don't have to watch me do it. I'm going to wrap this with size 0.020. I'm going to put on about 14 wraps. And when I put them on, I'm going to kind of push the lead up into the cone head. I am using a white thread. I think it's a 6/0. Just a basic unithread here. I'm going to start it on the shank. I'm going to cover it up on the lead wraps so that they don't move when I'm tying stuff on as we go along. Build a nice base for the next stages of the fly. This fly really only uses 3 materials. It uses marabou, it uses partridge feathers, and I use schlappen as a collar. So it's not particularly complicated in terms of the materials that you're using, but it is sort of time consuming in terms of putting all those materials on. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take a small clump of marabou. Sorry. And I want it to be about a shank length from where I tie it on. I tie it on there. Part of it is this counter is pretty slick. I'm noticing.
Yeah, I noticed. Oh, it's easy to move that.
Yeah,
There's-
it would be better. Try.
What do you need,
Makes it a
Michael?
little easier. I'm just gonna see if it's better if I, yeah, a little bit, not much, but a little. Good there. A little blurry. Okay, refocus there. All right, so once that's tied in, I'm gonna take out my partridge. The thing that's I like is even though it's a bottom kind of towards the bottom of the water column, I'm not bouncing it along rocks, and I don't use a lot of these. I don't lose a lot of these when I'm fishing them. So I don't mind the time that it takes to tie them. I'm using a partridge skin. The joy of this fly is that I'm using partridge feathers that are too big for most of the soft hackles that I use. So that when I've got one of these partridge skins that's sort of spent in terms of having feathers that I can use to tie 14, 16, and 18 soft hackles, I can still use a lot of the other feathers on this fly. I really do only tie like 6 to 8 of these a year, and I hope that they make it for me for a year because they take a while to tie out. I'm going to kind of ideally look for some of the bigger feathers that have this kind of nice, if you can see it, gray and brown coloration to them that are on the slightly bigger side. And just to make my life easy, I'm going to pick a couple of those off. I'm going to clean off the bottom of them. I'm going to form a tie-in point here at the back of the fly, where the tail ends. I'm going to tie this in. I am going to.
You're tying them by the tip.
I'm tying it in by the tip, and I'm using my cleared off stem to help me kind of wrap it around the body. I'm going to wrap it around the body, and as I do so, I'm going to kind of stroke the fibers back so that they sort of end up pointed towards the back. I got a whopping 2 wraps out of that feather. This is the joy and why I don't like tying them a lot, because you are now going to take these feathers and clean them and wrap them forward until they reach the front of the hook. Just messed up a feather there, so I'm going to find another one that I can use.
Perfect winter
It's the perfect winter fly. This will keep you occupied
fly.
for plenty of time as you try to tie them on. Again, I kind of separate the feathers that I've got. I make a little tie-in point. I'm going to put it on there. I always dream that I'm going to get one of these feathers that's going to get me 5 or 6 wraps. If I'm lucky, I get 2 or 3 wraps. And that time again, I got about 3 joyous wraps. I'm not going to repeat this so that you have to watch it repeatedly. Instead, I'm going to tie that off. And I'm going to bring one that I did 3/4 of the way
Magic.
through over the course of the weekend. As I move towards the front of the feather of the fly, I am looking for slightly larger feathers, slightly longer. Trying to find one right now that's kind of not completely horrible. I'm trying to look for some that are slightly longer in terms. I will get, I'll get more wraps out of these, obviously, but I only get to use a couple of these as they get towards the front. Again, I'm tying in by the tip. And then even with the big feather, I only get about 3 wraps, which is the joy of this fly. But I'm gonna bring I'm gonna keep tying until you can see, until I get right up to the cone. And then when I get to the cone, I'm going to tie in a bleached white schlappen feather. I'm going to clean all the fluff off the stem because I don't want any of the fluff. Again, I tie in by the tip. I created one of those points where I could tie in at. Cut off the tag. And then I'm just going to start wrapping. And folding the feathers back to make a column. I'm going to wrap it right up to the cone. And then I'm going to tie it off. And this is your finished Moto's minnow. It is, again, it's a slow tie. You don't need a lot of them. You don't lose a lot of them. It is phenomenally beautiful in the water. I think that that kind of mottled feather body really adds something special to the pattern. You could call it kind of, again, I like tying woolly buggers. This is kind of a fancy pain in the butt woolly bugger. It's got a nice column, a nice marabou tail, and an interesting body that kind of comes through that collar. Do you want to switch over? If anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And we can also begin the process to transition to our next tire.
How durable is it?
It's a very durable fly. I mean, I literally only use about 6 of them a year. And I've it takes the bites. I mean, you're wrapping the body down so heavily.
Right.
And those feathers are stacked. The feathers are stacked in there tight. It doesn't unravel. When I'm tying, I would typically, knot off a couple of times just to kind of, have a new start point. So it looks like we've got no bids yet on the flies. This is all of the flies go to whoever wins it.
So you get 4 boxes, you get.
Yeah, you get 4 fly boxes. You
like
probably
50
get
nymphs.
about I want to say it's
50
like 5
streamers.
dozen nymphs. You probably got about 6 or 7 dozen streamers. Many of the patterns are the patterns that we tied tonight. Those complex buggers are amazing flies, as you'll see.
Yes, we might have
if you go to
about
a
120 flies. or
If you go to a fly shop, you'd probably pay about $5 or $6 for the complex buggers. You're gonna have some of the most amazing Thunder Creek minnows that Eric is gonna tie for us. I'll say that Don's and my flies are also interesting and good, but nowhere near as interesting or good as Eric's and Josh's, which are worth the price of admission.
And you can't go to a fly shop and buy a Thunder Creek minnow.
Yeah, that's right.
You just can't do it.
I don't even know that you could buy a Moto's minnow.
That's a good point.
I've never seen one in a fly shop.
Yeah.
Orvis sells them.
Wow.
It's an Orvis pattern. They're in the Orvis catalog.
All right.
That's the only place I've ever seen them.
All right.
Is in the Orvis catalog. I've never seen them in the store.
So all of the flies do go to one person. All of the proceeds go to our youth endeavors, not to other things within the chapter. The money we raise goes to our kids' activities. And I will. Are you going to tie next, Eric? Sure. I will transition over to Eric and let Josh talk loud. You have anything to say, Josh?
I don't have anything to say right now. There are a couple of bids starting to come in on the flies. Current high bid is $75 from Mr. Jason Harrington. You can drop your bids in the chat as we go.
And please, again, this has been a pretty quiet group. Please ask us questions.
If you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat. I'll yell them out to the viewers. We did have one question earlier from Shahab, which is, why is Michael so cool? And I asked Shahab if you wanted Michael's answer or the truth. So,
I think we want Michael's answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we all get to comment on this?
Oh, we
and
can-
then I said we only have a limited amount of time, so you can't listen to Michael go on and on all night about how cool he is.
Michael's pretty cool.
I'm glad we all agree on that. Thank you, Shahab.
Shahab's you're so cool.
Also, I will write the recipes for all 4 of these patterns will be included in our next newsletter. So, if you're not writing them down, don't worry about it. We will all provide them and they will be in the March newsletter, which will come out in a couple of weeks, ideally in time to get everybody psyched for the Iron Fly. Again, if you're anywhere in the area, please come out to the Iron Fly. It should be a blast. It's also Taco Tuesday. I was there for their pizza and their pizza is amazing. So I am hoping their tacos are equally amazing.
I mean, even a bad taco is still pretty good.
Words of wisdom from Josh. And with that, it is Eric's game. Do we know how to switch you off and on?
Yeah, I'll switch it over in a second.
Okay.
I was just getting all my
All right.
stuff kind of fiddled. I was gonna say
So
a
high
thing.
bid right now it's 150 in the class. Which one?
Cool. So the high bid for the flies is $150. So thank you for those of you that have been putting bids in. It's awesome. We really appreciate it. The youth of our future appreciates it. I suppose if you're curious, so Salt Point, it's a new facility. It's been there for a year and a half or so. Big spectrum of beers. I guess I have to put the vaccine thing is, not, but you have to wear a mask if you're walking around. If you're at your table, you can take your mask off. So for those of you that are curious, like you're doing an in-person event, that's the safety precautions that are being taken. So there you go. Cool. I'm gonna switch over to the camera and I'm gonna tie a fly that whenever I talk about this fly, it seems to elicit some interesting reactions. And it's one that I've fished a ton and caught a lot of fish on. So away we go. All right. So this is not a new pattern. This is the Thunder Creek Minnow. I'll show you a finished version just so we have some kind of starting point. It is a small trout-sized streamer, bass-sized streamer. This was designed by a gentleman named Keith Fulsher in the 70s. He was from Wisconsin, and he wanted a fly that was not like other flies. He wanted a fly that would better replicate the sort of narrow profile minnows. So darters, shiners, smelt, black-nosed dace. that sort of thing. And it's, it's arguable that this is really one of the only flies that does that, or at least does it well. I would say that the Clouser minnow is another really streamlined streamer that sort of matches that type of bait fish. But if you think about a lot of streamers, just like we've been seeing tonight, as awesome as they are, they're very full-bodied. They do a great job imitating leeches or sculpins or gobies. But the Thunder Creek is kind of special because it's a very narrow profile. And if you walk streams around here, oftentimes I'll see young of the year trout stacked up in back eddies or tons of black nose days. And so it really fills a niche that is hard to fill by other types of flies. Keith Fulcher would often tie these unweighted or lightly weighted. I almost always tie them lightly weighted. And as much as Michael's going to hate hearing me say this, this is a fly that a lot of times when I see fish rising, I will throw this fly upstream and strip it down really fast.
Yeah.
And I will see the fish get distracted from eating those silly little bugs and come over and whack this thing.
That's fine with me.
Cast upstream.
I'm good with that.
Cast upstream.
And this is actually one of my go-to spring flies. So a lot of times when I'm fishing for, migratory trout in the springtime, especially in really skinny kind of riffly water, this is one that I'll throw upstream, kind of across the current, and then fish back to me. It's got some sort of more challenge to tie, and so often talking about this fly, people would be like, "Oh man, I've tied it and it doesn't, look right, or it doesn't fish right, or kind of, flops over. It doesn't fish kind of uniformly in the water column." So hopefully, I'll be able to kind of illuminate you on a few of these kind of, there's a few things that make or break it, but there's also a few checkpoints along the way. So that way, if you're wondering, am I tying this in a way that's gonna kind of be the right proportions, you'll know before you're done with it and realize, damn it, I just tied it off and it doesn't look right. So you'll be able to know beforehand, so you can kind of back off and undo it to end up with a fly that you're going to be pretty happy with. The other thing about this fly that very few flies on this planet can kind of tout is there was a freaking book written about it. How many singular fly patterns have a book, a hardcover book written about one?
People are saying they're having a hard time hearing me.
Oh, I got to talk louder. Sorry, everyone. All right, I will try to talk louder. I used to be a team lead facilitator, now I talk really loud, and now I work by myself out in the woods, so I don't talk as loud. So sorry about that, everyone. I'm going to tie this fly tonight on a size 1 Daiichi 2461. This is not my favorite hook, but it's good. This is a 3x long streamer hook, Bartlett. I'll show you one not in the package. It's a straight ring eye. It doesn't have a down or an upturn. A little bit of downturn's fine. The original fly, he preferred a 6x long, usually in a size 8. This is a 3x long and a size of 1. It's actually pretty similar in size to what he would originally have tied. Another hook that I like, if I can find there it is. Another hook is a Daiichi 9395 in a size 4. And these are also, I like these because they're a stronger hook. This hook in this size, I actually like a lot. Smaller sizes, I've bent them out on some big fish, and that's why I'm kind of sour on them. But this size hook, the size 1, is quite good, and I have not had any problems with it. That's my only issue that I have with the hook, is past experiences in the little sizes. All right. To start this off, I'm going to use Michael's .020 lead. Thanks, Michael. I don't like wasting materials, so I just take the whole spool and take, I kind of hold it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 wraps, and then I'll just kind of wiggle off the extra and just wrap. That way I haven't wasted anything. everything is expensive and only getting more so. So I prefer to not waste things. I'm going to place that just about at the halfway point along the shank of the hook. I'm going to move it just a hair. If it has got a bit of a nose dive, more than just a neutral dive when it drops. My thread is a Vivas 50 denier gel spun. I really like this thread a whole lot. It's super strong, like Don was explaining earlier. It's incredibly thin. And I tend to tie with white a lot. People don't like gel spun. Some people don't like gel spun. It's a little bit tricky to work with. Pull it tight when you cut it and have bobbins dedicated to gel spun. It can create grooves in bobbins, and that's why people don't like it. But if you just have bobbins that only use gel spun, it won't be a problem. It just affects the bobbin. The thread doesn't care. But I like white pretty much for anything that I want the color to pop. If you tie this fly with a dark thread, it won't show as much, right? So I like white, and then I usually finish flies with whatever color I want to be seen. You may have noticed I did just a little bit of a thread dam in the front, a little bit in the back, just to offer a touch of taper. It also helps to hold the lead in place better. And I'm going to just bring the thread back to the bend of the hook. There's a pile of materials here, and I have what I'm looking for somewhere in here. Oh. Sorry. Did you grab me that black bag over there? Sorry, everyone. For what it's worth, everybody here is laughing at me, and you probably are too, and rightly so. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, we're laughing because we've all done the same exact thing.
There we go.
I'll be at my table and I'll be doing the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I did the thing that I got upset at Michael for.
That looks pretty good.
All right. All right. So body for this fly is going to be my favorite. Well, this is probably my favorite streamer body material. This is flat diamond braid. This stuff is awesome. The original pattern called for embossed tinsel, but I stand by my belief. I can't speak for anybody, but I feel like people who tied with the materials they tied with when they tied them were using the best of the best. And if they were alive today, they probably would be tying with different materials. This is really strong. It's flat. It's got a very scale-like sheen to it, which is one of the reasons I like it. So I'm gonna, and again, I don't like waste materials. So I've just sort of flaked the material nice and loose inside the bag. And then I just have the tag out so I can just pull it as I need it from the bag. I don't have to cut a chunk off and have a couple inches that I throw away after each fly, because that you just burn the material so fast. I'm going to do a small tail on this. And so what I'll do is take just about 1/4 of an inch or 1/3 of an inch, lay it off the back end, and do a few wraps. 1, 2, 3. I'll make sure it's sitting on top of the hook shank, like so. Once I'm happy with kind of how it looks, pull down. I'm kind of holding it on top while pulling down. That way it's nicely tensioned. And then I'll bring the thread up to the front of the hook. And I'll just kind of pick this. Just a little bit more of a movement. I don't love flies, at least not my trout flies. But a little touch is nice. I'm gonna regal.
You can do this, bro.
All right. Non-rotary vise. It's 2022, guys. I haven't wrapped the material. Probably since I did Zoom with you guys last year. I had a regal. I know, regals are nice.
It's your annual throwback Tuesday.
I know. What have I done 2 times over? But we're getting there. Regals they're very nice vices. They're the only vice that I will put holes in my thumb with when I try to put a hook inside of one because I won't have it seated well enough. And it's totally my fault. And I go to close it and it shoots out and lands in my thumb. All right, so the important thing about this fly is you leave plenty of space at the front. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff up here. So you want to make sure to stop wrapping accordingly. In fact, I'm going to back up just a hair.
Would you say that you're like 2/3 of the way?
Yeah, this is probably like
Three-quarters.
maybe a quarter. Yeah, I've probably covered 3/4 of the shank material and I have about a quarter left to work with. We're gonna have a lot going on and I don't want to shortchange myself. So I've put the body on. I'm gonna just make a few more wraps to make sure that's nicely held down. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna tie this as a black nose dace. And so to that end, we're going to do 3 colors of bucktail. And we're going to start off with black. This will be kind of the middle portion of the fly. And for this fly, I deviate a little bit. The originator liked the hair towards the bottom end, which is a little bit longer and a little bit stiffer. It's more hollow. I tend to prefer the bucktail that would work really well for a Clouser minnow. So I tend to prefer a little bit thinner, finer hair because it just moves better and it doesn't flare as much. That's just me. But he always used the stuff at the kind of the bottom end. Sparse is the key with this. If you think you have little enough, you probably have too much. And so when working with bucktail, especially in a fly like this, take a small clump, pinch, and then pull out the really short fibers. We have no use for those. And then once you get the really short stuff out, take a look at your clump, grab the handful of the longest fibers, pull those out, and then we're going to reset them to get them more in line with the average length. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Down here, it's a bit brighter. Okay, it's a pretty sparse group of fibers. Make it easy on yourself. So just when you have the bucktail kind of set how you want it, you reset some of the fibers. So I just go through and cut the butts off again just to make all of it kind of more uniform. So I took the longer ones and shortened them, which meant that my butts came out. So I'm going to tie this in just straight back, and I want it to extend beyond the end of the hook by maybe a third of the shank length. This is a touch subjective. I would err on the side of not as long compared to longer. If you go too long with bucktail, you can end up having a lot of hookers kind of like wrap around the hook shank and get caught. So go beyond the end, but not crazy long. If you wanted to get a longer fly, get a longer shanked hook rather than just go way long with bucktail. Okay. So I want to make sure that this bucktail stays on top of the hook shank. That's pretty crucial. So I'm going to do just kind of pinch. I'm going to do a few loose wraps. Take a second, sort them out to get them on top of the hook shank. Get them about where you want them. And then once they are, I'll just kind of pinch again and then pull down. And that'll really help hold the fibers top of the hook shank. I'll do that one more time. Okay, looks good. Now, I'm tying it just in front of the body material, and I'm not tying very far forward because I want to leave as much of this really kind of untouched as possible. I don't want it to get too bulky up here is what I'm trying to say. So I've trimmed that off, and now we're going to use, like I said, I don't use a lot of flash. Some flies like that Murdich Minnow, geez, that's like, it's a lot of flash. I believe that it works.
When I first started to tie it, I underflashed the hell out of it because I couldn't believe how much flash I should be using.
Yeah, so we're gonna use a little bit less. We're gonna use a whole one piece of Creolex. This is kind of a root beer color, and we're gonna use a whole, not even a whole. This is where I waste material. One whole piece of flash. So I'm gonna take one strand, fold it. I'm gonna double it over so both ends are there. I'm going to then cut. I'm going to take this, I'm going to lay this, so it now becomes 2 strands on the near side of the fly. I'm putting the guys with me to sleep.
No.
2 of them just yawned. So this is now 2 strands of flash on my side. I'm going to then take the flash, kind of fold it over to their side, and then it's 2 strands on the other. So I got a little bit of root beer, colored Creel X now tied in. Okay, so it's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to move my thread to the halfway point of that large kind of the space at the front. Okay, and that's important, and you'll see why in a second. I'm going to move over to kind of this is a Colin Nash color. I don't know if he's on tonight, but this is, you don't see Colin on. Okay, he makes really nice bucktails. Don't go to a fly shop and buy bucktails. Don't go to most fly shops and buy bucktails. Get them from Colin, get them from Brad Budsey, get them from Lon's Fly Shop. Get good go to Sportsman's Warehouse. All right, so this is a nice bucktail, and we're going to use, this is pretty modeled.
That was great.
We're going to use some of this. I'm going to use just a touch more, but not hardly at all, compared to that clump of black. Sparse is key with this. Sparse is super duper key. If you look at most minnows in the water, you can almost see through them. You want to do the same thing with this fly. So that's way too much. So I'm going to just grab the clump at the halfway point, and then at the bottom end, I'm going to pull the short stuff out. I'm going to do that again because now there's more in there. Look at all that. Oh, sorry. All right. Sorry about that. So cleaned it up. It's still too much. Now, the thing with bucktail, I'll do the same thing again. So again, I'm looking at those kind of longer, there's like 6 or 8 of the really long fibers. Pull those out and then get them closer to the typical length of your fibers. Okay, that looks better. And again, now I've got this bunch on the bottom end. I'm just going to kind of clean that up. And sometimes with bucktails, they've been in the bag too long and they have kind of a set to them, like a curve. So always roll your bucktail, kind of roll it, and then kind of knock it out. Because what that'll do is it'll kind of undo any set and it'll make it a more straight clump of bucktail. Still too much material. And this is where you can go and look at it and decide, you know what? I've rolled this a few times. These fibers are rude. I'm going to get rid of them. This fiber is totally rude. I'm going to get rid of that one. These are too short. Going to get rid of these. And then that'll get you down to pretty much what you want to use for this. And this is where some of the measurement comes in, because now we have a nicely stacked clump of bucktail with a good overall length. I'm going to flip it so that the tips are forward, like so. Oops, there we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to line the tips up with the very front of the tie-in point. And I'm going to go back just beyond the very back of the fly to the point at which I feel confident that when I tie it in like here, when I fold it back over, it's going to extend just beyond what I've already tied in, the black bucktail and the root beer flash. So we're going to see if I just pulled that off correctly in my measurements. And again, threads at the halfway point, and that matters. So I'm going to lay this forward. I'm going to kind of pinch, do a soft loop, 1, 2, 3, and then work the fibers to the back on top of the hook shank. Pull that down. I'm going to wrap just behind the eye, pull that down. Okay, now before I do anything, I now have the material set where I want it. So this is a checkpoint. I'm going to fold it back and just see, how does this length look in comparison to the other materials? And it comes just beyond the black bucktail and the root beer flesh. So my measurements worked pretty darn well. And this is why it was important to tie it in at the halfway point, because now, rather than having to try and really cut the butt of the brown out around the other stuff, I can pull it straight up, and there's a significant gap in between where I tied the brown in and where I tied the black in. So it's much easier to go in and then trim that out without messing anything else up.
Nice. Good tip.
All right. So looks pretty good. This looks like the first tie that I ever the first fly that I ever tied. Hopefully it doesn't end looking that way.
Except that was supposed to be an Adam.
Oh, right, yes, it's supposed to be Adams. At least I can put
This
this
is
thing
what
over.
time.
All right, so we're closing in. We're gonna go to some white. I often will use a very light tan, but just for contrast sake, I'm gonna use some white bucktail tonight. And again, anything that would work for a clouser will work great for this fly. So I'm gonna take about the same size clump. Way too big. You think that it's sparse when you cut it out and you look at it and you're like, that's twice as much as I need. But the reality is once you go through and you kind of fiddle with all the kind of cleaning up of this stuff, removing any of the fibers that are too short or too long, you'll end up with a good amount. So if I look at that, I still have some fibers that are way too long. So pull those out, reset them. The average length is now more reflective of more fibers. All right. And then those are totally rude. These don't have really nice tips on them. That one's pretty rude. That one doesn't have a nice tip on it. That one doesn't have a nice tip on it. All right. And then we're down to about what we really want to have. Pretty sparse clump of bucktail. And now it's easy because I got the brown the right length. I just want to make this the same length. I don't have to do any other. So I can lay this on the bottom of the hook and I can set it and get it to pretty much the same length as the brown because I know that that length will work well. So I can tie much more confidently knowing that, all right, this is all going to work out. But there's still some details you want to make sure of because it's crucial for this to have a really defined separation between the white and the brown. You really want it to be clear because if you think about, you've probably all seen the black-nosed dace. It's a pretty defined coloration top to bottom. So it's worth taking another minute, another second just to kind of get everything set. Pull down nice and tight. Do a few more reps, and then I can just lift these up. Again, I tie these in at the halfway point. So it's easy to just trim nice and flush. Just one fiber. All right. That's pretty good. And like I was saying earlier, I like to finish with a different color typically. So I'm going to just do a few half hitches. I'm not really worried about these coming out because we're going to be using some glue at the end. So I'm not stressed, worried that these half hitches are not going to last. I may have said it already, but if you know, gel spun is kind of a pain to cut, so pull it tight and use sharp scissors. And then I'm going to switch from the 50 denier white gel spun to a uni thread A.dot orange. Red would be good too, but I was out of red. And these guys probably have red, but I didn't ask before.
Right next to you.
Oh, sweet. All right, so I'm
I
not
don't know
going
if it's threaded though, so that could be the bigger problem.
that's threaded.
All right.
What is this? This is 72 denier red. Okay, even better. I got red. Shows how focused I get, where I literally had a spool of red thread next to me on this fancy toolbar and I didn't even see it. So I'm just kind of, I don't really care that much. I want a little bit of red, but it's pretty much going to get covered up once we fold the bucktail over. So I'm not going to stress that I can see some of the white through it. That's really not that important.
Eric, why at this point are you switching from gel spun to a regular thread?
Well, because you only get gel spun in black or white, and I want to finish with red. Because this is going to be a little bit of a hot spot for the fly, kind of imitating the gills. That was a good question. And just another little something to make the color pop. And that's why I want to finish with a red thread, because this is the only thread you're going to see.
Can you color gel spun? Like if you had a Sharpie, can you color it?
Not
I
really.
don't tie with it, so I don't know.
No, it
Yeah,
doesn't
gel
really.
spun does not like
It does not take color.
Okay.
Yeah, because if it did, you could buy it colored, but it's just black or white. So Yeah, but that's why I'm switching question. And please, if anybody else has questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to use my very technical high-end bucktail tool. You can buy these and you can spend a lot of money on them. It's an empty pen. This one came from the community fly fisher, which
That is a valuable one.
That's
this is a super, this is a, yes, this is a priceless bucktail tool. So I'm going to just take this. Oh, so before I do this, you'll notice I've brought the red thread back to the tie-in point of the black. So in fact, I just want to come back just a hair farther. It's easy to kind of shortchange the head of this, and it's kind of the whole point of this fly. So I brought the back just a little bit farther. And then I'll take this. You could just with your fingers, but it's just easier, and I kind of like doing this. And so what you're going to do is just fold the bucktail back, and this is worth taking a little bit of time and just manipulating it and really pinching with your fingers, because you want to get this sort of as flat and as flush as possible. And oh, this is cool. I'm looking at my side and I can see the other side in the zoom. So normally, what's that?
You should tell it this all the time.
I should tell you this all the time where I can see the other side
Up
of the
your
fly. Yeah,
side will be just as good
this
as
is
your near
awesome.
side.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Or get a mirror.
Oh yeah, that would work too. So normally what I would do is I have a peanut gallery. Normally what I would do is kind of look at it from all angles before I tie it in. But what I'll do is I'll just do a few wraps, not super tight, and then see how it looks. And I want to make sure there's a nice clear delineation of brown and white top to bottom, and that I don't have, what'll happen sometimes, and this is why I like to take a second and really push the bucktail down, is you'll get some of it kind of like bent and kind of bulged out, and that can get air pockets and it'll cause the fly to not sit right. So I really want to make sure that this is like compact, really flush with the body, but I'm happy with this. I don't have to redo it at all. So I'm going to just do a few more wraps with a red, make a bit of a collar, and so probably a quick finishing tool around here somewhere, but I don't see one, so I'll just kind of 1, 2, 3. There's literally a bunch of bucktail. We're going to be putting cool. All right, it's looking pretty good. And now to finish this fly, Keith Fulcher would use lacquer because he didn't have UV resin, but we do. And if he were alive today, I would speculate he would be a big fan of UV glue. Oh, one last thing before I get to the point I'm going to glue this. One trick with bucktail is oftentimes, you've probably seen it with clousers, where you get some of the fiber on this side of the hook kind of hung around the hook bend on the other side, and it kind of swims funny and it looks kind of funny. So what we can do is take a bodkin, and I'm going to try right down the center and see if I can do this and show you. Maybe if I can look at the camera, the computer, and not drop the fly out of the vise. Oh goodness, this is like patting my head and doing something else. All right, what I'm trying to do, let me do it once and then I'll show you, is just kicking, just kind of angling the bucktail a little bit. Because if it's naturally inclined to go out away from the hook point, it'll be less inclined to get hung up around it. And it doesn't seem like much, but it actually makes a big difference in terms of how many times it'll get fouled. It won't, I'm not saying it'll never get fouled, but if you can kind of cause it to kick away before you've glued it, you've just caused a lot fewer fouls. So I'm going to just kind of pull it. Maybe you can begin to see a little bit of that V. Doesn't show up really well in the camera. It does exist, it is there, but that'll help it foul less. And I want to do that before I put the glue on, because once I put the glue on, that's going to kind of get embedded in the fibers and kind of cause it to be set however it is. So Now that I've done that, I'm going to take some Solarez. This is their bone dry. This is the best. That it doesn't get better. Literally does not get better than that. I also cut the brush off because the brush is terrible. And then I'll take bodkin. Let the record show Don just said the brush is a piece of shit.
I'm gonna cut it off when I get home.
Or angry at your bottle of Solarez.
Don is really mad at his bottle of Solarez. And I'm just doing a thin coat. And it's important, I think, with this to give it a little bit of time to just soak into the materials before you cure it. It will absorb.
So the Solarez bone dry is that thinner one that is not. Right?
Yes,
Like,
this
so
is-
like you're using Loon, for example, you want to use Flow. If you're
Yeah,
still like,
and this is
living
yeah.
in 2020 where we use Loon.
Yeah, I don't understand. This is thinner than flow. This is significant. This is really close in consistency to your classic just head cement. It's very watery. And what that does is it really allows it to soak in really well and not add bulk hardly at all. And so I tend to put effort in because it's illegal to just kind of spin the thing around.
You look exhausted.
Dude, I'm
You look like
tired.
you're churning butter.
It's like in the old days when you couldn't buy butter in the store.
For anybody who owns and ties in a reel and loves it, I'm super happy for you. We all have our own thing, right? Like people tie in HMH, people tie in Dyna King, people tie in Griffin. They're all good places. It's just suits you. All right, so now that we have one coat, I'm going to go to bone dry black, so it's the same consistency, and I'm going to make a couple eyes. Now, this one I didn't cut the brush off because I think that it's easier. I'll show you because the brush always gets wonky anyway. So now I can just kind of stick a bodkin in
Stick the bodkin into the brush.
into the brush. Yeah, into the brush. And this is important. So I'm not going to like go head on with the bodkin. I'm going to lay the bodkin so that it's perpendicular. Parallel, sorry. I'm doing this very deftly. You can overdo it pretty easily. I'm going parallel, and then I'm going to hit it with a light. So I've made one eye, and I'll do it again. If you go straight down, you tend to overdo it. It just drops the whole like blob of bone dry straight down. And so doing it parallel, even that I overdid it. It's really easy to overdo this stuff. It's bigger than I would have liked, but it's not going to hurt it. And so you have a nice defined eye. In fact, Keith Fulsher would do like yellow and then black over it. I didn't bring my yellow with me. So I have one thin coat of clear, black eyes, and now I'm going to do one more thin coat of clear over top. I'm just going to kind of go over everything. This helps just make it more durable. Make sure to cover the red wraps like so. And now that this blue is sitting on a hard layer, it's going to run a lot more. So I'm just going to take a second. I'm going to just kind of try to get it nice uniformly around by just sort of spinning it. And then sometimes if you see it show up on the bottom, you can kind of like even it out with a bodkin. But I want it to be as even as possible before I hit it with a light. Okay. Give it a second. It's better to do a few shorter pulses with UV lights than a long one because you can cook it, you can burn it, and then it gets too brittle and it'll yellow. So a few shorter pulses is better. But that's pretty good. And, you know, the classic trick, if I had a glass of beer, I'd show you, but the classic trick is just to kind of wet it to make it look a little bit better because bucktail has that tendency to kind of flare. once you fish it once, go away. But whenever you want to do like a post for Instagram, you want to make sure to get your flies nicely preened before posting them up. You know, they can't look like they're fresh off the place.
Model them out there.
So there you go, Thunder Creek Minnow. Hopefully that took some of the mystery out of it, because I know usually when I talk about this fly, people are kind of befuddled by it. So there you go. If you have questions, please ask. I love answering them. How are we doing with the
So we have a significant update.
okay, we have a significant update, I'm told. I'll switch over to a different camera.
Michael, wanna pop over to the
Sure.
mic and I'll set up.
Sure. So the update on the fly raffle is we are going to close the raffle now. Bruce Akey and Mike Lynch have decided that they would each honor their bid for half of the flies. So we will get $375 for the flies from the two of them, which is really amazing. I don't know how to thank either of them
Super
enough.
generous. Thanks so much,
Yeah,
guys.
It is
Amazing.
super generous. It is beyond anything that I was really hoping for, but it's wonderful. You know, that will send a class out on the Discover Q, the lake boat. It will get a class to one of the local streams to release fish from the Trout in the Classroom program. It will pay for half of a tank. It'll do a lot of things for the kids. It will send one kid to the DEC youth camp. So that is really wonderful, and we greatly appreciate it. I am going to try to gather some more flies and a couple more boxes so that they each end up with some nice setups, but I really do appreciate that. I appreciate those of you who put in bids, and this is a pretty wonderful outcome. We're going to transition over to Josh, who is going to crank out our last fly pattern, which will be a
Complex twist bugger.
complex twist woolly bugger. It's a beautiful, effective, useful fly. Caught a lot of fish on it. You might have to readjust the camera for him because he's
Yeah.
using a different device.
That's all right.
I appreciate all of you who have come here. I see some new faces and names of the folks who are here. I hope you come back to other events. If you are local, I hope you come out to our upcoming Ironfly and introduce yourself again. As I think Josh or Eric said earlier, whether or not you plan on participating in the Ironfly and tying flies, you're still welcome to come out, hear fish stories, talk to each other, meet new people. It should be a great event. We haven't had many in-person events in the past 2 years, and it will be nice to have it. It's a pretty big open space, although it is indoors. We are in the fermenting rooms, and it's a very large, open, and airy space. For those of you who haven't been out there before.
So, and just one quick thing to add, like, we know that some people, like, it's bad night or for whatever reason you can't make it. When we did the fly fishing film a couple of years ago, I think part of the reason why that was so successful is that people told people, right? People shared it, they told their friends, like, if you couldn't make it, you know, you probably told someone that you knew that it was going on. So, you know, we understand, of course, if you know, for whatever reason you can't join us, but please tell your friends, share it on Facebook. That's really, honestly, that's how we get people to these things, is, you know, word of mouth. So.
Okay, you have to look at my ugly mug for just a second while we get things set up and focused in on the other camera here. Then we'll go through one last fly for the night. What can I do to help you? I like to have it up like that. Now if we just sort of center it up, we'll be good. You can see it on the screen. It's pretty good. Yep. Would it help if I moved it this way some, so it's in front of my white shirt and not so much in the background over there?
Yeah,
You see, okay?
if you can tie that, that
Yeah,
looks better.
I can do
Yeah,
that.
if you can,
Yeah.
do that. Is that okay?
I'll try to sit in front of it more.
Okay. I can get it better than that.
Yes.
A lot of extras. Okay, so as we're sort of dialing this in right here, I'll start talking and we'll go through some of the materials that we're gonna use for this fly. So typically when I tie this fly, I tie it in at least a size 4. I mean, almost always is a size 4. So it's a size 4, 4X long streamer hooks. I seem to have a shortage of 4X long streamer hooks in my house this morning when I was looking for my materials. So I've got these old Dairiki 700s. These are 4X long. Typically what I like to use are these Daiichi 1750s. This is my preferred hook for all things streamer, bugger. So this is your typical 4X long.
You might want to put that
Long
closer. It's
hook.
a little on
Here. There we go. The Daiichi 1750. These were size 6. Apparently I'm out of size 4, so I'll be ordering those later tonight when I get home. So in the meantime, we're going to use this Dairiki, which is the cheapo sort of substitute for that. Okay, they don't even make these guys anymore. These guys, the hook points will break off for you. They're a disaster. So even if you find these on sale, don't buy them. You're not saving anything except frustration. Okay, so use a Daiichi. Use a high quality hook. I find it funny that we spend $1,000 on a fly rod, $400 on a reel, $100 on a line, and then we bitch that a package of hooks is $4.95, right? So spend a little bit extra. That's the thing that ultimately connects us to the fish. So it seems silly in my mind to try to save money on hooks, and that's sort of the most important piece of all the gear that we've just assembled, right? So, so that's my 2 cents on hooks. Spend a little bit of extra money, get a quality hook. It'll save you the heartache of having to lose a nice fish. Okay. Okay. So I've got on here a cone. So I've got on a large brass cone again. So various manufacturers make these cones. These are just large brass ones. They're 1/4 inch. You could use a tungsten on here. I don't always use the tungsten, so they can get pretty heavy. But what I'd like to do then is to fill this up with some wire. So this is gonna be a lot like how Michael started his fly. We're gonna put the cone on this hook, 4X long, size 4 hook. And I'm gonna put on some wire. So I'm gonna put, I don't know, 18 wraps or so. I'm gonna start here, and everything's in my way for some reason. So I'm gonna start this again. And unlike Eric, I just wasted a lot of my wire here. So I'm gonna put it on here. I'm gonna pinch it, I'm gonna wrap it. And I'm gonna put on about 18 or so wraps of lead. Okay, so I'm gonna cover a good portion of this hook shank with lead. And then I'm gonna tuck that up into the head here. I'll see that. So I'm gonna continue to wrap. Tucked up in the head, and it sort of helps to lock that cone head that I put on there in place and keep it from wiggling and wobbling around to make it much more secure. Now I've covered half of my hook. I'm gonna pinch off the end, and I'm just gonna sort of give that a pinch and smooth it out there. Okay. Now I'm gonna attach my thread. Sorry. Find some thread. So I'm going to use white. Actually, I have green because I was going to do this in like an olive color. See another bobbin out here? We have a very small counter, but we're still losing all of our material. I'm looking for a bobbin with green thread. Oh yeah, it's right here. So on this Regal, I have this beautiful tool caddy, which is right where I put my green thread. Okay, so thank you, Eric, for spotting that for me.
Anytime, bro.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with green thread. I'm gonna use Danville flat wax nylon. This is pretty here. It's 200 denier. All my streamers. I use this flat wax nylon. What's wrong here? Okay. So I'm just gonna start my thread right behind those wire wraps. I'm gonna build up a little bit of a thread dam there. I'm gonna go forward and cover that thread up, or cover up those lead wraps. Put a bunch of wraps through them. Some will fall in between the gaps in there. But I really want to lock that down and lock that in place. Help hold that cone in place too. I'm going to build a little ramp and a little dam behind my wire so it doesn't slide back on me. Once I have it more or less covered, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to trim off my tag end. Okay, move my thread back point for my first material. So first material, this is a woolly bugger. So it's going to have a big fluffy marabou tail. I'm going to do this one sort of an olive. You can do any combination of colors on these that you want. So I'm going to start with some strung blood quill marabou here. Olive brown. Okay, you can use any color of olive you want. Use regular olive. Any flavor that you like. So I'm going to pick out a couple of big fluffy pieces of this. So I want this tail to be pretty big, pretty bulky, pretty significant on here. So I'm going to sort through my marabou and I'm going to look for some big fluffy pieces. I like this one. Okay. And I'm going to pull out another one that sort of matches that, about the same size. Okay, another good big fluffy piece here. So I'm going to line these two up at the tips. And then I'm going to peel off some of this fluffy stuff down towards the bottom and stems here. So I'm going to peel off all of this stuff at the bottom. I'll show you what that looks like after I've preened them. Okay, so I'm exposing the stem there. And I've still got big fluffy bits on my tail. So I got two pieces sort of tied side by side for each other. Okay, so next I'm going to measure this. So I want this to be about the same length as my hook. So there's one hook length. I'm going to go just a little bit more. So maybe like 1 1/4 or so. So I have a big fluffy tail hanging off the back of here. So I'm going to use that as my tie-in point. I'm going to transfer it to my left hand, put that right above where my thread is. I'm going to wrap this down. So I'm going to start wrapping forward on these guys. Okay. Marabou will tend to twist a little bit as you're. Good idea. Just to let that tension off of it. So now I'm going to wrap back towards the bend of my hook. And as I wrap back every once in a while, I'm going to let go and stroke the fibers back, then wrap back a little bit more under tension, let it go, sort of make sure that it's all fluffy and nothing's too bound down there. So a big fluffy double marabou tail there. I'm now going to wrap forward over that, just make sure it's all locked in and come right up to sort of where I have that lead wire. Okay. I'm going to give my stems a little bit of a twist here. Cut them off. Okay. I could trim up some more of that fluffy stuff there, but we're going to wrap lots of stuff over here still. So we're going to leave it sort of how it is. Just going to go over that, smooth it out just a little bit. Okay, at this point, we can throw in some flash in the tail here. Okay. Unlike Eric, this is Eric's fly and Michael's fly. This is a flashy fly. We're going to have a lot of sparkle and flash in here. So we could put some flash in the tail, sort of a complementary color. Root beer is nice on here. Eric was nice enough to leave his root beer flash on the table for me. So I'm going to swipe a couple strands of this. And I'm going to put just a couple strands down each side of my tail. Oops, I don't know how Eric gets his flash out of the bag. I don't want to mess it up for him. Okay. So what I do when I get a new package of flash, my flash is in here like this. You can see that. I take my scissors and I cut the corner off, and then I can just pull. So when my flash is inside the bag,
Down. There you go.
okay. My flash is inside the bag. I'll cut the top corner off, and then I can just pull out 1 or 2 pieces through that top cut corner at a time, and it sort of keeps it all in a manageable shape. But now I've taken this out of the bag and five strand, cut them off. Okay, so I have a nice little clump of flash. I'm going to tie it in on one side of the hook. So I'm going to tie it in on the far side first. Okay, just going to put down 3 or 4 wraps, then wrap back up to the base of my marabou there and let those strands hang off. Then I'm going to come forward a bit. I'm going to take the flash that I have on the other side of the fly now. I'm going to fold it over, put it parallel to the hook, and then tie it down on this side to match how it is on the other side. So these strands are a little long. We'll come back in and clean those up in a minute. But you can see I've got some flash on this side and over here on the other side. They're roughly equal, okay? So we'll leave those hang out for a second off the back of the fly. Next, we're gonna get to the part where, so why is this called a complex twist bugger, okay? It's a complex twist because we're gonna twist some materials together. It's gonna be a complex mixture of those. So we're gonna mix and match some various pieces now to create the body of the fly. So the goal here is to make a fluffy, dense, flashy body that's hackled and flashed and bound down all at the same time, okay? Instead of wrapping one thing forward, then wrapping over it, we're gonna twist them all together and make sort of a dubbing brush out of them and move them all forward at once. So to make up this part, I'm gonna use some flashy material. So I'm gonna start with this as my base. I'm gonna use UV polar chenille. In this case, I'm using a UV copper color. So it's kind of a rusty olive color, okay? Great color, super crayfishy looking, excellent for bass, trout, etc. Okay? So we're gonna cut off a little piece of this. Comes on a hank like this. You can see it's a one-sided sort of flashy chenille material, okay? Pretty long fibers on here. They sell different sizes. They sell like small, medium, and regular. This is the regular, so this is the longest of those fibers. So I'm gonna cut off a chunk that's maybe 4 or 5 inches of this, okay? This is a corded product, which means that it's got a main cord running through it. So we're gonna expose a little bit of that cord for a tie-in point that we can bind down nice, okay? So I'm just gonna use my fingers, strip some of it off, and you can see that I've exposed that braided cord there, okay? Oops. Let me give it a little trim with my scissors to make it a little more really there. So I'm gonna tie that in now. Just gonna throw down 5 or 6 wraps of that, bring it right back up to my marabou. I'm just gonna let hang out off the back for now. Then we're gonna put in the rest of the materials. The rest of the materials are, in this case, I'm gonna throw in a second color of polar chenille. So I am going to, oops, there we go. Add in some olive brown polar chenille now as well. This is gonna make the complex twist part. So I'm gonna cut another piece of this that's about the same length as the other one, tie it in right on top of this. So now we've got 2 materials making up our body. We got 2 flashy materials. Okay, we're gonna twist all these together and wind them together as one cord eventually
Hey,
here.
Josh,
Yes, sir.
do you ever use lead-free wire for this, or do you try to always use lead?
You know, wherever I can get away with it, I like to use lead. The lead-free wire is just not as heavy. Like I got to put on way more wraps. If I was using lead-free wire, I'd probably use a tungsten cone instead. Some places you can only fish with lead-free flies, Yellowstone area, for example. These fish deep, but they don't necessarily bounce off the rocks. You're retrieving them a little more actively. So you don't tend to lose a lot of these on the rocks and stuff where you really have to worry about contaminating the stream too much with lead. Get the gun company's already done that. We're trying to clean that up still. So I fished these a lot in Fall Creek as well. So my contribution of lead is a drop in the bucket compared to what's already there, I think. So I tend not to worry about it that much. Okay, so we've got 2 body materials in here. Okay, I'm just gonna leave those hang off the back. Now we're gonna put in some feathers, okay? So I'm gonna put in 2 different types here. So I'm gonna put in some badger colored hackle. So this is from a whiting bugger pack. I'm also going to put in a piece of strung olive schlappen, okay? So I'm gonna use one of each of these. We're gonna tie those in as well. So I like the badger, this nice dark stem down the center with some brown around the edges, and we palmer that forward. It gives it a really nice like black center with some nice brown fiery furnace colors around the edges. So I'm gonna get a nice long feather from that. Okay, so I'm gonna tie this feather in by the tip. Shahab, you're right. It is furnace, not badger. I misspoke. There's always one kid like you in every class. So I'm gonna let that hang off the back as well. And then I'm gonna get a piece of schlappen and tie that in. So those are gonna be the 4 components of our bodies here. You can mix and match this in any way that you want. You can mix and match any colors, any materials. You could put in 2 hackles. You could put in 3 different colors of hackles. You could put in 3 different colors of the flash. You could use a shorter flash and a longer flash. Sort of the beauty of this is that it's really up to you, whatever sort of materials you have at hand. So I've got a piece of schlappen here. So the schlappen is just sort of longer than all the others. Okay. I'm going to prep that the same way. I'm going to peel back some at the tip to make a nice little tie-in point there. You can see this is nice and bushy, sort of long fibers. That's going to make a nice collar on this fly. So I'm going to tie that in as well and go back to my tie-in point. I'm going to cover that up, cut off the tip. And now I'm going to bring my thread all the way up to behind this cone. Okay, I'm going to throw in a half hitch there real quick. And I'm just going to let my bobbin hang there for now. Okay, so it's going to wait there till I move all the other colors forward. So we could wrap these materials one at a time, right? But in this complex twist bugger, we're going to do it all at the same time. So we're going to use the hackle plier. I find this style actually works better. This isn't my favorite hackle plier for like working with hackles normally, but for this, it works the best. Okay, so it's this old like electrical clip style. Okay, so we're going to grab onto all these materials. So I'm going to bring them all around here. You can see here, maybe, that these are all about the same length. Okay, so I can make one pass with my clip here at the end. Pretty much any kind of clip you have to hold all these materials together will work. Alligator clip works great. Other types of fibers or hackle pliers work great as well. So now we have all of those 3-4 pieces together. I'm going to take my fingers and just sort of manipulate those fibers to get a lot of things like bushy and spread out there so that they're not all clumped together. Okay, so I'm spreading out that hackle. I'm spreading out some fibers from that flash that we tied in from the polar chenille. Okay, now I'm going to twist this up. So this might be hard for us to see here. You can sort of see it. So I'm giving it a bunch of twists. So we made it complex. Now we're twisting it. Okay, so I'm essentially making a little dubbing rope here.
You brush it out before you wrap it.
Yeah, so I'm going to brush it out in just a second here. So I'm going to wrap that up really tight till my, till it gets bunched up all the way to the end here. So maybe like 25 wraps or so. Okay, so now I've got like a nice brush here, but a lot of the fibers are trapped here. So I'm going to use my toothbrush. Okay, I'm going to brush this all. Wow.
Is that the same one that you use every night? And every
Yeah, that's why one I always use. Hope Dad's not watching. My dad's a retired dentist. He'd die. Okay, so I'm going to brush out all those fibers. I don't know if you can see that, but now we have things sort of going in all dimensions around this to make like a nice bushy rope, sort of. Okay, so now we're simply going to wrap this forward. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it forward. I'm going to watch my hook point there on my first wrap, sort of avoid it. And then I'm going to make sort of spaced out wraps here, and I'm going to take and stroke these fibers back sort of with each wrap. You're right, I did. So on the second wrap, I'm also going to watch the hook point because I don't always have Eric here to spot me. So as I'm wrapping forward, I'm going to try to stroke all those fibers back so I'm not trapping them and wrapping over top of them. Okay, so I'll sort of pinch and wrap back with each wrap forward. So we're going to brush this out again at the end as we're trapping down some of our fibers. So we can try to space it out so we get to the front of this 4X long hook. Okay, so we've got some of that bushy stuff from the schlappen there. That's actually nice. It gives a really nice collar and really nice movement at the end. I'm going to put one more wrap up here, right behind the cone. Okay, and I'm going to take my thread and sort of work it through these. I don't want to pinch down these stems. I want to sort of tie in front of that stem right there. So I'm going to push that all the way with my finger. Get my thread to go back behind there, and between that and the cone. Sort of another pass through here. I'm sort of wiggling my thread back and forth to sort of weave it through these fibers so I don't trap a lot of them at this point. Now I've got it pretty well bound down. So I'm going to go in here with my scissors. Cut this off. I'm using my finger here. You can see I'm using my index finger to pull my thread back out of the way so I can avoid cutting that. And hopefully I didn't cut it. And I have very little waste here on the end of the fly. You have a stem still in there. I can feel that's hard, and I want to get that out of there. Get that out there. I'm just going to clean this up. I'm going to put a few passes here, right behind the cone. Try to make sure all those materials are caught and down. So I'm going to go around 5 or 6 times here. Okay, and then I'm simply going to lay down a whip finish. So whip finish is going to go right behind the cone there as well. Do like a 4 or 5 turns of finish here. Using pretty heavy thread, so it's pretty heavy duty. Make sure that's seated really well. A lot of times we don't check our knots to make sure they actually seat them. Let me go in here and just flip that off with my scissors. Now, looks kind of messy, but messy is good when you're talking about buggers, okay? So we're gonna sort of comb this out some again. Comb it forward, tease out a lot of these fibers, all directions, and then I'm gonna comb it back here. Just like how I do my hair every morning. Or I used to. Now I don't really need a brush. So I'm gonna adjust that cone a little bit. Make sure those fibers are sort of stuck up there and buried in that cone. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the look of that. I'm gonna come back here now at the end and cut off some of this flash. We left this flash hanging back here and it's super long. I'm gonna let it go a little longer than the tail, okay? So there's the end of the tail. I'm gonna go maybe 1/4 of an inch or so. I'm gonna cut it on an angle, let it go. And I'm gonna go in there and sort of nip a couple of these so that they're not all blunt and the same size. So go in, give them an array of sizes there. So that's the finished fly. So it's pretty big, it's pretty bushy. Oops, sorry. Trying to hold it there. I should have just left it in the vise because you all can see it better there. So the beauty of this is that we can make this in any color combinations we need to. White, silver, white and gold is really good. Brown and yellow. But for around here, I use a lot of these olive ones. Okay.
And that's a lot of material. So I like the times I've used them, I've never really had any issue with them hitting bottom because if anything, that cone actually helps get it down a little bit.
Yeah, this will sort of nosedive a little bit. Okay, but it's not super heavy. There's a lot of buoyancy built in here because we have 2 hackles, we have 2 marabou feathers, and we have all that polar chenille. All those things make this sort of buoyant. So it's not super heavy and doesn't go down real fast, even though we do have all those lead wraps as well as that cone on there. It's not going to drop like a rock and hit straight to the bottom. It sort of rides nice, you know, maybe 1.5 feet or so above the bottom in most cases. Okay, so typically fish this on a floating line. You can throw this easily on your 5 weight. I'd usually probably throw this size on a 6 weight. It's a little bit heavy. You can do it on a 5. You can do it on a 4 if you had to. But usually I fish these for bass, larger trout, landlocks, lake fish. So I'm usually throwing after something a little bigger. So I usually fish this on a minimum sort of a 6 weight.
Josh, the original pattern I think had some like laser dub or something tied into the as a collar.
Yeah,
so
you
do that.
Yeah, so on this one you can see we're sort of at the cut now. I'm gonna back it off. Yeah, there we go. So there is a little bit of space behind that cone and where our stuff is. We could make a small dubbing collar there to cover that up and put a layer of laser dub around there. So you tie it in, put a clump in. Other people also tie this with an extra marabou wing that sort of goes over the top. They call that one a little Kim. I don't know why, but it's basically the same fly, except you have an extra marabou wing right here, where you would tie in a piece of marabou here, just a little fluff that goes over the top, usually in a contrasting color. So like on this one, I would put in a wing that was maybe brighter sort of on there, right? Just a little hot spot that sort of extends maybe halfway back up the fly. So you just use the tip of marabou right there. Very cool. So that's the last one for tonight, guys.